Have you ever heard your own child look you in the eyes and say, "You can't do anything, old man"? I have. And I can tell you, that moment doesn't just break your heart, it breaks something much deeper. My name is Thomas Grayson, I'm 62 years old, born and raised in Ohio, and I spent my whole life believing that hard work and family loyalty could overcome anything. I built a small but respected logistics company from the ground up, trucks, warehouses, distribution routes, all run by integrity. I wasn't rich like the tech giants in New York or Silicon Valley, but I was proud. I owned my home, paid my employees well, and gave back to the community. And I thought my son, Logan, would one day take that same pride in continuing what I started. Logan was my only child. Bright, ambitious, and restless. From a young age, he wanted more. Faster cars, bigger houses, flashier dreams. I saw it as drive, I didn't see it as greed. After college, I gave him a position at the company. Not at the top, but close enough to learn. And for a while, things went well. We worked side by side, father and son. But the more success we had, the more he changed. He started talking differently. "Dad, you're stuck in the past," he'd say. "We need investors, not handshakes. We need automation, not loyalty." I'd smile, trying to understand. "Son, you can't automate trust." He'd roll his eyes. "That's why you'll never scale." We argued more and more. I thought it was just a generational clash, old values versus new ambitions. But I didn't know that while I was still trying to build bridges, he was already tearing them down behind my back. One morning, I got an email from our accounting department asking if I had approved new ownership papers. My heart sank. Ownership papers? What papers? I rushed to the office. My longtime lawyer, Ellen Marks, met me at the door. She looked uneasy. "Tom," she said, "I tried to call you last night. Your son filed documents, transferring your majority shares to him. He's claiming you signed the consent digitally." I froze. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." She hesitated. "The system shows your signature." I checked. "It's identical." My chest tightened. Logan had access to my digital signature for internal approvals. He used it to steal my company. When I confronted him, he didn't even look guilty. He just leaned back in my office chair, my chair, and said, "Dad, don't make this dramatic. You've done your part. I'll handle it from here." I stared at him, my voice trembling. "You forged my signature, Logan. You took everything I built." He shrugged. "You're overreacting. I just made sure we move forward without your outdated thinking holding us back." "Outdated thinking?" I repeated, stunned. "Yeah," he said, smirking. "Dad, face it. You're old. Times have changed. You can't do anything about it now." Those words burned through me like acid. "You can't do anything." I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Overnight, my access to company accounts was revoked. My name was removed from the official website. Within a week, Logan announced himself as CEO of Grayson Logistics. I wasn't just betrayed, I was erased. I moved out of the big house and into a small apartment on the edge of town. My wife had passed years ago, and now even my company, my life's purpose, was gone. People whispered, "Tom's kid pushed him out." Some felt pity, others just shook their heads. But none of them knew the truth. They didn't know that my own son had looked me in the eye and said I was useless. For months, I stayed quiet. I spent my mornings walking by the river, my afternoons reading, and my nights sitting in silence. But silence can be dangerous. It gives you time to think. And one day, while reading an old company file I'd saved on a USB drive, I realized something. Logan may have taken the company name, but not the heart of it. He had power. I had experience. And experience never retires. That day, something inside me woke up again. He thought I couldn't do anything. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. When a man loses everything, he learns what truly matters. And when that man is me, someone who built an empire from the ground up, he also learns that losing it doesn't mean he's finished. It just means he's starting over. I didn't plan my revenge overnight. I planned my rebirth. For months after Logan took over Grayson Logistics, I kept my head down. I watched. I listened. I read every article, every interview he gave. He was on magazine covers now, the young CEO transforming Midwest logistics. His smile in those photos looked nothing like the boy I once raised. It looked rehearsed, hollow. But beneath the headlines, I noticed cracks forming. Clients were leaving. Deadlines were missed. Rumors of layoffs surfaced. Logan was modernizing everything, except his character. You see, success isn't built on shiny apps and slogans. It's built on trust. And trust was something Logan couldn't fake. One morning, while drinking cheap coffee at a diner in Columbus, I overheard two contractors talking about Grayson Logistics. "Man, that new CEO's impossible," one said. "He promises the world, but doesn't pay on time. We're pulling our equipment next week." My heart skipped. These were the same contractors who'd once worked loyally with me for years. That was my opening. I waited a few days, then called them, using an old contact card they'd saved. "Hey, this is Tom Grayson." They paused, stunned. Tom? The old man himself. "Still old," I laughed, "but not dead yet." We met that evening in a small workshop on the east side of town. I told them what happened, not as a victim, but as a man ready to build again. "I'm not here to steal clients," I said. "I'm here to build something better, fair, honest, efficient." They exchanged glances, and one of them said, "You mean like how it used to be?" "Exactly." And just like that, the first brick of my comeback was laid. I started a new company under a different name, True Path Freight Solutions. I kept it quiet. No press, no flash. Just hard work. We rented an old warehouse on the outskirts of town, peeling paint, flickering lights, but strong bones. I hired a small team, veterans who'd worked with me years ago. Men who didn't care about luxury offices or fancy titles. Every morning, I'd unlock that rusty gate before sunrise, smell the cold diesel in the air, and feel alive again. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about proving that integrity still had a place in business. But fate has a way of helping those who move with purpose. Within months, a few former Grayson clients began calling me quietly. "Tom," one said, "Logan promised delivery in 2 weeks. It's been 2 months. Can you help us?" I smiled. "Yes. And I'll do it for half the price, and twice the honesty." We delivered on every contract. No delays. No excuses. Word spread fast. TruePath was becoming everything Grayson Logistics had forgotten to be. Then one afternoon, I got a call I didn't expect. It was Karen Whitfield, a senior representative from Midwest Automotive Group, one of the largest clients Grayson Logistics had ever handled. "Mr. Grayson," she said, "I know you're no longer with your old company, but our deliveries have been a disaster since your son took over. If you're running anything new, we'd like to talk." I almost laughed. "Karen, I don't run a corporation anymore. Just a small outfit," she replied firmly. "Then we'll start small." That one meeting changed everything. Midwest Automotive signed a 6-month contract with TruePath. The deal was modest, but the credibility it brought was enormous. Soon, other corporations followed, quietly, discreetly, like birds returning to a familiar tree. Logan noticed. I knew he did because one morning, I got an email from him. Subject: "Dad, we need to talk." I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, I saw him in person, unannounced, standing at the gate of my warehouse. He was wearing his usual tailored suit, though it didn't fit the surroundings. He looked around, at the forklifts, the workers, the chipped walls, and smirked. "So this is what you're doing now? Competing with me?" I leaned against my truck, calm. "I'm just working, Logan. Something you've forgotten how to do." He scoffed. "You think you can take back what's mine? Yours." I said quietly. "You mean what you stole?" He stepped closer. "Dad, let's be honest, you're too old for this game. You should have retired gracefully instead of embarrassing yourself." I smiled faintly. "Son, grace doesn't come from retirement. It comes from knowing who you are." He shook his head and walked off, muttering, "You can't stop me." But deep down, he was already scared. Because every deal I closed was one less for him. Every handshake I made was one reminder of who people really trusted. And then the moment I'd been waiting for came. His empire began to crack. It started with an audit. Federal inspectors found inconsistencies in Grayson Logistics' financial records, fake invoices, unpaid taxes, forged contracts. I didn't expose him. I didn't have to. His arrogance did it for me. The press tore into him. Young CEO under investigation for corporate fraud. Investors fled. Board members resigned. The empire he stole began collapsing from within. And while the world watched him fall, I stayed silent, running my company, paying my people, keeping my word. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was clarity. Logan had spent his life trying to prove he was smarter than me. But the truth was simple. He never understood that leadership isn't about control. It's about responsibility. By the time the investigation ended, Grayson Logistics was on the brink of bankruptcy. A journalist called me one day asking, "Mr. Grayson, do you have a statement about your son's situation?" I said softly, "No comment. But remind your readers, what's built on lies will always collapse under truth." That night, I sat alone in my office, the faint hum of the city outside, thinking about everything that had happened. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't fire or fury. It was quiet, like the sound of a man reclaiming his dignity. He thought I couldn't do anything. But I did everything. And the best part? I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. Still, something inside me said this wasn't over. Because sometimes, before redemption, there must be realization. And Logan hadn't reached his yet. That would come next. When you spend your whole life building something, and your own blood tears it down, you stop believing in justice. But sometimes, justice doesn't come from the courts. It comes from life itself. Months passed after Logan's company collapsed. I hadn't seen him in person since that day at my warehouse. The newspapers said he'd resigned as CEO, investors were suing him, and his reputation, once glittering, had turned into dust. I told myself I was done with it. I had my peace. But peace is fragile when it's built on silence. One rainy evening, while I was reviewing new contracts in my small office, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, there he was. Logan. He looked nothing like the man in those glossy magazines. His suit was wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes red and hollow. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was a young man who'd finally run out of excuses. "Dad," he said softly, standing in the doorway, drenched from the rain. I didn't know where else to go. For a moment, I said nothing. I just looked at him, the same boy I once held in my arms, now broken by the weight of his own choices. I stepped aside. "Come in." He hesitated, then entered quietly. He sat across from me, fidgeting with his hands. "I lost everything," he said finally. "The company, the investors, the house. Even my friends stopped answering my calls." I nodded slowly. "That's how it feels when you build something on lies, son. It collapses the moment truth knocks." He dropped his head. "I know. I was stupid, arrogant. I wanted to prove I could be better than you. But I ended up destroying everything you built." I didn't respond right away. My anger had burned out months ago, replaced by something heavier, sorrow. He looked up, eyes glistening. "I came to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I had to say it." The room fell silent. The rain outside hit the window like an old heartbeat. Finally, I said, "Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it, Logan. It's about who needs it to move forward. But tell me, have you really learned why you failed?" He swallowed hard. "Because I lost focus." I shook my head. "No. Because you lost character. And without character, focus is just greed in disguise." He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his face. "I want to make it right, Dad. Somehow." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "You can't bring back what's gone. But you can rebuild something better, if you're willing to start from zero." He looked up. "You'd let me work here?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no. To let him walk out into the cold, the the same way he'd left me. But the other part, the father in me, saw a man who finally understood pain, not power. "You start as a trainee," I said firmly. "No titles. No shortcuts. You earn every inch, like the rest of us." He nodded quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes." The next morning, Logan showed up early, before sunrise. He wore plain work clothes, carried a notebook, and didn't complain when the foreman handed him a broom. For weeks, he swept floors, loaded trucks, and learned the kind of humility that no business degree could teach. The men watched him curiously at first, whispering, "Isn't that the old man's son?" But over time, they stopped whispering, because they saw change. He listened. He worked hard. He kept his head down. And one afternoon, I caught him helping a junior driver fix a jammed forklift, not because he was told to, but because he wanted to. That's when I knew he was finally rebuilding, not his career, but his character. A few months later, I called him into my office. He stood at the door, unsure, like the first day he came back. I smiled faintly. "Close the door, Logan." He did. I slid a folder across the table. "These are partnership papers. I've been thinking, maybe it's time TruePath had a co-director." His eyes widened. "Me?" I nodded. "You've earned it, not because you're my son, but because you've shown me that people can change." He looked down, overwhelmed. "Dad, I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," I said softly. "But you're learning to." He didn't say anything, just stepped forward and hugged me. It was the first time he'd done that in years. For a moment, I felt the weight of every sleepless night lift off my shoulders. We stayed like that, two men who had finally found peace not in victory, but in understanding. As the months went by, business grew steadily. TruePath became known as a company built on honesty and second chances. We hired ex-workers from failed companies, veterans, even men who'd made mistakes in their pasts. We didn't just move goods across states. We moved people toward redemption. One evening, we were invited to a regional logistics conference in Chicago. The organizers wanted me to speak about resilience in business. When I got up on stage, the lights felt warm, the room quiet. I looked at the audience, hundreds of faces, and then at my son, sitting in the front row, watching me with pride. I said, "Years ago, I lost everything because of betrayal. But that betrayal taught me something important. Revenge builds nothing. Forgiveness builds everything. You can't control what others do to you, but you can control how you rise after it." The crowd stood and applauded. But the only eyes I cared about were his. Logan smiled, and I knew this time it was real. Later that night, we stood outside the hotel, watching the Chicago skyline. Logan said quietly, "You know, I used to think power was having people obey you. Now I think it's being able to admit when you're wrong." I smiled. "That's real power, son." He nodded. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I placed a hand on his shoulder. My father never truly did that. He just waited for his child to find his way home. We stood there in silence, two generations healed by the same truth, that no betrayal, no failure, no distance is stronger than forgiveness. Betrayal can destroy what's good, but not rebuild it. True revenge isn't breaking the one who hurt you. It's rebuilding stronger than before. And sometimes, forgiveness is the loudest form of justice.